Hi everybody, I'm Greg Fishel. Welcome to bonus weather video number 1 for this week. And this is going to be a long one, but I hope it's going to be entertaining for you. And for those of you that were here in central North Carolina back in February of 1979, you may very well recall this event that I'm going to go into great detail about. But this is the, what would it be? 21 plus 24, 45th anniversary of this storm, and I remember it like it was yesterday. And I have a couple of personal recollections that I'll share with you as we go on along the way here. So let me put myself in the corner and let us begin. And so the President's Day storm, as it was came to be known, was February 19th of 1979. But we're going to sort of set the stage here. So Saturday, February 17th at 1979 at 10 a.m., this was the pattern of isobars and temperatures. We had a massive area of Arctic high pressure sitting up here over the Great Lakes, and the cold air and all these pink colors here, even the lightest pink is below zero, and then it goes to minus 10 to minus 20, and then minus 20 to minus 30. So, I mean, this is bitterly cold air up here. And once that air gets over into New York State, New England, there's nothing to stop it from roaring southward east of the Appalachians. And this is what I've talked about all winter. We just haven't had a setup like this. We have cold air, shallow cold air, trying to come in from the northwest and cross the mountains, and it can't do it because it's very shallow and very stable. But when bitterly cold air gets over into the northeastern part of the United States, they ain't nothing holding it back, and it just roars down east of the mountains. And you can even see the isobars beginning to sort of wedge their way southward here down into the Carolinas, which is a telltale sign that cold air damming is beginning to take place. Now, here are the wind speeds at about 35,000 feet. And we've talked about jet streaks before, which are areas within the jet stream where the wind is blowing at a higher speed than it is anywhere else. And depending on where you are with respect to that jet streak, you either get rising motion or sinking motion. And so this is the axis of the jet, all these areas of stronger winds here. But here's this jet streak beginning to develop over southeast New Mexico and the Texas Panhandle. And so let's move on ahead now to that night and see how things change. Okay, so at 7 p.m. that night, the high pressure area has settled into the area around northern Michigan, extending southeastward into western New York State, and now the isobars are really wedging their way southward all the way down here into Georgia, and the below zero air is just south of the Mason-Dixon line. Now, let's take a look at the jet stream pattern. Now, we have a couple of jet streaks, but this one in here is the primary one, and this area in here is what we call the right entrance region of the jet streak. And so that's where you're going to have upward motion, and so that's beginning to take place in here now, and it's only a matter of time before the snow breaks out across the southeastern part of the United States. Now, I want to go back here. So this bitterly cold air is sinking southward east of the mountains. I was about to begin producing weather forecasts for a small radio station in a coal mining town called Shenandoah, Pennsylvania. And they were going to pay me, I think, $50 a month to do this, okay? So I decided I was going to drive over there this Saturday because I was going to start doing this Monday. And I introduced myself to the folks and sort of look at the lay of the land. And a good friend of mine, who was also majoring in meteorology and eventually became a rear admiral for the U.S. Navy, came with me. And so we took care of the formalities at the station. And then I turned to him and I said, "Have you ever been to the World Trade Center?" And he said, "No." And I said, "Let's go. It's only another 3 hours." So we drive on Interstate 80. We get to Manhattan about 7:30, I think. And we go up to the top of the World Trade Center and we look around, enjoy the view, and 15 or 20 minutes later, we're back downstairs in the car ready to go back. We notice that our gas gauge is almost down to E, but we refuse to pay the outrageous price of 80 cents a gallon for gas. That's out of the question, all right? And so we figure we're going to wait until we get into eastern Pennsylvania, where the prices will undoubtedly be a little bit lower. So we're now into eastern Pennsylvania. It's about 10 below zero, and the gas gauge is now below E, and we're starting to panic. And so I get off on an exit and I start driving down this road. And as soon as I see a car coming in my direction, I start driving toward that car, okay? I mean, literally driving right at it, so that this car had no choice but to stop, okay? And so he stops and we ask him, do you know of a gas station around here? Well, he gives us directions, but somehow we end up at a donut shop. And so we ask people in the donut shop if there's a gas station, and they say, yeah, go down this road, it's right down there. So we get down there and the gas station attendant is in his car because it's warmer in his car than it is inside the gas station, okay? And I can't remember if one of us had a credit card or we both had a little bit of cash on us, but we scraped together whatever resources we had and were able to get enough gas into the car to get us back to Penn State, okay? Now, there's an area north and west of Penn State called the Pine Barrens, and it has a very unique combination of soil type and topography, so that on a clear, calm night with snow on the ground, it can be as much as 30 degrees colder than downtown State College. And the all-time record that anybody knew about at the Pine Barrens was 42 below, and we thought we had a shot. So at 1 a.m., it was 34 below zero, according to other friends we had that were out there. And the cirrus clouds started coming in ahead of this storm and started intercepting the outgoing radiation and sending it back down to the ground. And so it stopped cooling at 34 below, and we were not able to break the record of 42 below. So those are a bunch of side stories that went on that night. Okay, so now let's move on ahead to 7 a.m. on Sunday morning. There we go. Well, now look at this. The Arctic high is over here just to the northwest of northern New York State. And look at the isobars just plowing down east of the Appalachians. And now the isobars are starting to curve the other way along the coast. And we call that an inverted trough or a coastal front. You got to remember that the ocean water temperatures are relatively warm. They're cooling the air above that, okay? And so you're creating a front, in a sense, between the bitterly cold air inland and the modified air over the ocean. And so the isobars start to kink the other way, and this is eventually going to be an area where an area of low pressure is going to develop. Now that jet streak is all the way up here, and so all of this area in here is in the right entrance region and has intense upward motion. So the snow is now coming down to beat the band, and I'll show you some actual observations from a couple of stations in North Carolina to show you how hard it was snowing. Okay, by 7 p.m. Sunday night, now we've got an area, a closed isobar here, just off the South Carolina coast, and the cold air, although still very, very cold, is beginning to retreat. You know, the really sub-zero stuff is beginning to move away, but it's still plenty cold east of the mountains here. Now, the axis of the jet stream has sunk southward so that it's like this. Well, as soon as the axis of the jet stream sinks south of us, we're not in the entrance region anymore, and so the snow just stops. The upward motion goes away, and that's exactly what happened right around 6 or 7 o'clock that night. Now, we move on ahead to 7 o'clock on Monday morning. Now look at this low, just wrapping up like mad, rapidly intensifying. And the snow is starting to come down at the rate of 3 to 4 to, in some extreme cases, even 5 inches an hour up across parts of Maryland, okay, around Baltimore. Now, I was also forecasting the weather for a radio station in Baltimore called WCAO, and I had predicted that they would get about a foot of snow out of the storm, and around 7 o'clock in the morning, that's exactly what they had, and it looked like it was going to wind down fairly soon, so I felt pretty good about things. Well then, after my first period class at 8 o'clock, I go up to the weather tower, and it says they've had 3 inches in the last hour. So I call the radio station and update the forecast to be 3 inches higher than a foot, or about 15. After my next class, I go up to the weather tower, and they've had another 3 inches of snow in the past hour, and so I up the accumulations to 18, and then after my next class, I go up to the weather tower, and they've gotten 4 more inches of snow. So they've gotten, what, 3, 6, 10 inches in 3 hours, okay? And so all I'm doing is reacting. It's not a forecast anymore. I mean, I'm just reacting to what's happening. And then finally it quit about 11 o'clock. and now they have a whole ton of snow on the ground, and we'll show you how much in just a second. And again, here's the original jet streak out here. The polar jet is like this. Subtropical jets here, the polar jet is like this. I've only shaded in the areas over 70 knots, but the jet stream actually extends up here. So this is a jet streak associated with the polar jet, and the other part of the jet streak that produces upward motion is the left exit region, which is up in here, okay? And that's where the storm blew up, all right? So these two branches of the jet, the first one is what gave North Carolina its heavy snow, and then this one coming along in the polar jet caused that explosion where some folks got 10 to 12 inches in just a 3-hour period. And then by 1 o'clock in the afternoon, that storm is just far enough offshore so that the snow is winding down except for the immediate coastal areas, but the wind is blowing like a son of a gun because of that tight pressure gradient. And one of the interesting things on the satellite about this storm, it became so intense that it took on almost hurricane characteristics. It developed an eye. That's what that dark area is in here. And then you can see the snow cover across North Carolina all the way back, toward the mountains and up into Virginia and Maryland. You can see some of the Blue Ridge Mountains here, or at least the Appalachian Mountains, showing up as darker colors. But just an amazing, amazing storm. Now, here are the hourly observations at RDU from 7 a.m. to 7 p.m. on February 18th of 1979. Can you believe these temperatures, okay? It dropped to 12 at 9 a.m., held there for an hour, went up to 13, oh boy, by 11, 12, and 1, and then got to 14 and stayed there all the way through 7 o'clock. The visibility steadily decreased, reaching 1/8 of a mile from 2 to 3 to 4 to 5 to 6 p.m. in heavy snow, and then started to taper off at 7, and by 8 it was done. And they reported a snow depth of 10, although at the rate it was snowing, or at least the observations would have suggested that there would have been even more than that, but a significant snow nonetheless. And Greensboro was even weirder. Look at this. The temperature at Greensboro with heavy snow was down to 7 in the middle of the day, okay, from 11 a.m. all the way until 1 p.m., and then it moderated to 8, oh boy, and by 7 o'clock it was up to a balmy 10, and they had 9 inches of snow on the ground. Now, I want to show you the observations from the Baltimore-Washington International Airport, which is what I was using as a gauge for my radio station that I was forecasting for. So in Baltimore, it started snowing at 4 o'clock on Sunday afternoon. So, we started early in the morning, took a while to get up there. Now, for some reason, they reported 3/4 of a mile visibility in light snow, and I'm not quite sure if it was light or not, because by the time we got to 1 in the morning, they had 4 inches of snow that had fallen, and they started off with 4 before the storm even got there, okay? So by 4 a.m., they're up to 7, and now we've got moderate snow, and the visibility is 3/8 of a mile. Now, let's move on ahead. At 5 a.m., the visibility is 3/8. Notice the temperature's going up now because they're starting to get a moderating effect of the wind coming in off the ocean. But at 6 a.m., between 5 and 6, they had 2 inches. Between 6 and 7, 3. Between 7 and 8, 3. Between 8 and 9, 4. And then finally, the snow tapered off around 11 a.m., and they reported 22 inches on the ground. They started with 4, so that would imply 18. But you got to remember that snow settles, okay? And so it's very possible that more than 18 inches fell, adding on to the original 4 to get the 22. Very possible they had more than that. It's just that it actually settled, and that's what they ended up with on the ground at 11 o'clock. And notice by noon, when the snow was over, it was up to 30, okay? So that's a good bit warmer than any temperature we had in North Carolina during our snow here. All right, there are the credits. That is a storm that will live in infamy. You won't believe the amount of scientific literature that was written, peer-reviewed papers, especially by 2 gentlemen. One, Lance Bossart, who was a distinguished professor of meteorology at the State University of New York at Albany, and Louis Uccellini, who started off at NASA Goddard and eventually became the head of the National Weather Service. Both those gentlemen are now retired. And there's one other gentleman I need to mention, and he was a grad student at Penn State when I was an undergrad, Paul Cosin. And if you're a real weather enthusiast, Paul Cosin and Louis Uccellini teamed up and wrote a 2-volume book about great snowstorms in the Northeast. And I'm sure you can find it on Amazon or Barnes and Noble or whatever. But Paul Cosin and Louis Uccellini are just two amazing scientists. And Paul Cosin was actually a winter weather specialist at the Weather Channel for a while. Some of you may remember that. So if you really want a deep dive into classic East Coast snowstorms, you need to check those 2 volumes out. That is the bonus weather video. I know it's a long one, but I'm very passionate about that storm, and I hope for those of you that are passionate about the weather, you found that interesting. The next bonus weather video will be on Wednesday. The daily weather update, of course, will be coming up later this afternoon. Hope to see you for that. So y'all take care, folks, and we'll talk to you soon. See you later.